This week at Lebanon Rope, we're talking about handling anger.
I'm so angry that we had to record this twice.
Don't tell them that.
Oh,
now
sorry.
I'm angry at you for telling them we had to record this twice. Along with Andrew Pate and J.D. Buckner, I'm Adam Fawn, and we're glad to have the three of us back together, one of our triple guy weeks here, and looking forward to this week's video. You know, guys, I've heard people talk before about this subject of anger, and it's one of those things that we don't talk about all that much. And I think sometimes it's because some people think that anger itself is wrong. Well, let's start there. This idea that anger is one of those things that not only is just natural, but it's not sinful.
Yeah, I guess that notion probably comes from childhood. Having children and remembering what it was like to be a child, anytime you got angry, your parents really encouraged you not to be angry, yeah? And I think at least for me, when I encourage my boys not to be angry, I'm thinking about being angry and sinning not, but the way it might translate to them is don't ever be angry at all. Nothing should ever upset you, so that's a really interesting point.
Yeah. And Andrew, we see in the Bible, not just people being angry, but even God and Christ being angry.
Right. I mean, you see a couple instances where God was always, it seemed like something the children of Israel always did was either get on God's bad side, and then they come back at the good side, but even God gets angry. And so that comforts me in knowing that, I can get angry, but I know that God gets angry too. So I guess that's kind of what I have on that.
Yeah. We're talking on Wednesday nights in my auditorium class. We're just walking through the Old Testament, and I'm giving them a handout, a worksheet for each of the Old Testament books. And one of the sections of that is God's nature or God's characteristics in that book. And like every one of them, it seems like there's a passage somewhere in that book that one of the characteristics is God's wrathful.
Right.
It's in all of them. I guess so far all the ones we've covered, I think Ruth is the only one where that's not seen. And we're into like First Kings or something. It's unbelievable how often it's there. But just because we have an emotion doesn't mean we can just run wild with that emotion.
Right.
And that comes to play here as we talk about anger. Ephesians 4:26, I think both of you guys are there, tells us, it gives the command, be angry. That's a command. There's no other way to read that than a straight statement of command. But then the verse goes on to say, be angry, but do not sin, or yet do not sin. And so there's a command there that there should be anger within us. If you see a child being abused, see that on the news. Mm-hmm. You see certain immorality running through society. There should be an anger that builds within the Christian because some wrong is being done, or some sinful lifestyle, or some sinful way of life is being promoted or being pushed, or is growing within society. But there's a righteous way and a sinful way to react to that anger. And that's what Paul is talking about in that verse, is handle your anger, control the anger, use the anger for good. JD, I'll let you talk to that just for a moment here.
Well, it makes me think so much about Jesus when he cleansed the temple, which I'm sure lots of people's minds are going to that. But in every gospel account, you have the instance where Jesus cleansed the temple. But I believe it's in the book of Luke where it says before he cleansed the temple, he prepared himself a scourge or a whip. So, Jesus was angry, but he was taking the time to build this thing to drive out people from something they were doing wrong. And that made me think of another thing that we should be angry at that perhaps we're not as much in today's society. You mentioned when a child is abused, we get very angry, but what about when somebody misuses the Lord's name, or profanes the worship or the worship of God or God's word? Those things we just sort of accept as commonplace for so many people in the world to treat God that way. But maybe we should be a little angry about that, a little offended, a little shocked and appalled. I don't know.
Yeah, I think you're right. That's the one instance for sure where you can't miss the fact that Jesus was angry, was when people were misusing the place where God was represented, the temple. And it's important for us to note there that Jesus cleansed the temple, he overturned the tables, he all those things, but he didn't hurt the people. He didn't go in and start killing people or wiping people out. He disrupted the order, he disrupted the business, he made sure they knew what was going on, but he didn't take it out on them physically. He did the right thing. He did the righteous thing in showing what they were doing was wrong without physically harming them. And there's a key line there that he would not cross because he righteously used his anger for something that's proper. Yeah, Andrew, we do a lot of rehearsing for these videos. So Andrew's getting a question really cold here. How do you handle anger? Are you a stuffer? Are you an exploder? How do you handle it most of the time?
Especially when watching sports or maybe with, I'm kind of wanting to flex your every muscle in your body,
He's
it makes it feel better. But I deal with it, and I kind of go off by myself, and wish I had a punching bag sometimes. But
he's a stuffer.
I'm a little bit of everything when it comes to anger. I don't think there's really one thing that you really can go to, but really it's just, I guess, sitting there and thinking, what's the outcome of the things that's going to happen when I get angry? And so I just really try to focus on maybe my inward anger, but I don't really say anything and, just try to handle it. But really, that's kind of what happens.
Yeah. I was watching or listening to something recently where it talks about how people handled anger. He's talking about specifically how Christians handle anger. And he had 3 categories. He said some are stuffers, people who just always just put it inside, never deal with it, and of course explodes eventually. But that's me. I'll just put it away. Passive aggressive. Yep. Some, he said, are exploders. They just immediately fight back. Sometimes even literally fight back, but they just explode. I think he called them spewers because they just spew venom, in their anger. Some, he said, were leakers and these are the people who sort of kind of let you know they're mad, and it offends you. They say, "Oh, I was just kidding." So they're kind of feeling you out all the time. Sometimes it's sarcastic. Sometimes, "Oh, I was just kidding." And he said all of those are really unhealthy in different ways. Mm-hmm. Because either stuffing, you're building up all sorts of bitterness inside of you. Spewing, you're talking what you're going to say or what you're going to do that can be completely sinful. And even the leaking idea, he said, usually you're lying because you weren't kidding or you weren't being sarcastic when you said it. And his solution then was, instead of those 3 things, to be channelers, was the way he put it. To take the anger, and what we've been talking about, use it for something good. Right. To channel it to something like you said. If someone is taking God's name in vain, well, you're not going to go up and just punch them in the face. That would be completely, maybe JD would.
Just kidding. I would never do that.
That would be completely unchristian. But you also, I know this is horrible grammar, but you don't do nothing. You channel it to either say something like, "Hey, that's offensive to me because that's my God," or you channel it to create a sermon or create a devotional or create a Bible class or something where something positive comes out of the anger. Mm-hmm. And I think that's part of what Paul has to say in the rest of that verse. Do not let the sun go down in your wrath. Think of something productive that can be done because you are angry. Don't let it just go away because the anger is real. Don't just stuff it and never deal with it again, but think of something, channel something, to use that guy's word, that is positive and that's good out of the anger.
That's a really good thought.
Going back to thinking, it's okay to be angry. I mean, you look at it and it's hard for us not to be brutally honest with people, because when we're brutally honest, we're angry, but at the same time, if we never tell them, then maybe we don't correct the error of their way, and it's kind of the getting in yourself to, like, if someone's beating a child or something, they're never going to know if you don't tell them. So it's kind of like with Jesus with the scribes and Pharisees. Woe to you, woe to you, scribes and Pharisees. So thinking back of what Jesus did, that's kind of what I try to do, is not exactly be as brutally honest as Jesus is. That sometimes I'm trying to work on that, but just going back to his example.
Yeah, it's just saying what needs to be said, and sometimes it's said out of anger, but it's said in a way that is productive and is showing the sin without just destroying the person or destroying any. You're working on making them a better person in saying those things. I'll tell you guys one quick story. I know we're probably over time already, but I'll tell you one quick story that I read recently. I thought it was a really good way of handling anger. This guy said he had a friend, and they were walking through the mall one time, and his friend saw another man who was just yelling at probably his girlfriend or fiance or something. He said, "That's just not how guys are supposed to, deal with women." And so this guy walked over to him and actually put his finger right on the guy's chest and just said, "This is not continuing." And I thought, wow, that's a great way to handle anger. But then I turned the page in the book, and the guy said, but of course my friend is 6'4" and played college football. And I was like, okay, but I thought, seriously, any guy, any person, that's a good way to handle anger. He didn't destroy the person, but he simply uses anger to say, this is not right. This is something that needs to be channeled for good, and this should not go on. So that's handling anger is one of those things all of us struggle with. We all are angry. It's not sinful to be angry, as long as we're angry about things that are right.
Right.
But then are we channeling that to do things that are right? We hope this has been helpful. Oh, you got something else to say?
I was just thinking, so you're saying channel your anger to create, not to destroy.
We should have just said that, and we would save our viewers 12, 13 minutes of their
That's
time
it.
here. There we go.
Let us do the videos next week.
We hope you enjoyed this devotional this week. We tried to work, by the way, on the technical side of things. We hope we got the volume worked out. Some of you had said you're having trouble hearing us, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. But we hope that's been fixed, and let us know if it has or has not. We appreciate your input and feedback on that. We look forward to being back with you again next week for these videos. Until then, this is This Week at Lebanon Road.